Hey everyone, I'm Mark Morgan, and today we're going to take a look at part 2 in our discussion about how to improvise. In the last video, I talked about how I like to start broad when thinking about improvising and then narrow it down. Today we're going to continue to narrow down my approach to improvising, and we're going to do that through using scales that fit over specific chords. Now, one thing that I want to stress is that we don't improvise playing up and down scales. We may practice learning our scales that way, but we don't necessarily make up a solo playing like that. You need to think of using scales as a collection of notes that we get to choose from that help outline or emphasize the chord progression. I'm not going to go into a deep theory lesson here, but when it comes to chords, you need to know that basic chords are made up of the first, third, and fifth notes of a scale. In jazz, we typically include other notes from the scale, which include the seventh note. These notes played together provide the palette that we use to create our solos. Think of chord progressions as a map, and the scales are the different pathways you can take to reach your goal. You're going to find that there are a lot of different scales that you can use to play over a single chord, and this kind of variety is what makes jazz so interesting. You don't have to be confined to just one or two different kinds of sounds. You get to really express how you hear the music and communicate that to your audience. And this brings up another really important point. Don't get caught up in thinking that you only have to play the right notes. As I mentioned in my previous video, don't think of these as rules necessarily, but rather as guides that help you navigate the changes. So when it comes to using scales in a solo, you're going to find that we use scale fragments, arpeggios, wide intervals, and most importantly, passing tones. In the last video, I used just 3 notes to play over a single chord, a concert C minor. I like to start out using this chord because every note in the scale that we're going to play over it sounds like it fits. And the 3 notes that I used to play over that chord were the first 3 notes of a concert C Dorian scale. Another thing that's good about using this scale is that you probably already know how to play it, but you don't realize it. This scale comes from the mode that is based on the second note of a concert B flat major scale. So all you have to do is play your concert B flat major scale, but just start on the second note. And if we take a look at the chord tones of the scale, which are C, E flat, G, and B flat, we have a C minor 7 chord. Let's hear how that sounds playing the scale over the chord. As you can tell, each note sounds like it fits within that chord without any clashing between the notes. And this is a good place to start because it gives the beginning improviser a chance to focus on playing lines that fit in the style without having to worry about playing these so-called right or wrong notes. So now let's start working on this scale and figure out how many different ways we can practice it to really get the notes under our fingers and the sound of it in our ears. Obviously, the first way is to learn by playing it up and down. Then you need to reverse that and start from the top and play it down and up. With all of these variations, they need to be practiced one way and then with the inversion. Once you have the scale under your fingers, start playing fragments of the scale in groups of 3, 4, and 5. You could practice this with a backing track, but you don't have to play these consecutively. You could put some space between the fragments and work on your jazz style. Another way we need to learn the scale is by playing in intervals. We're going to start with an interval of a third, but you can also do wider intervals like fourths and fifths. Remember to practice your jazz style when you work on these scale variations. And in jazz, you typically emphasize the higher note in the line, so try to do that when you're playing these intervals. Next, we're going to arpeggiate the scale by playing these notes in thirds, starting on each note in the scale. We can also do this using 4-note groupings in thirds. We can now start combining all of these different ways to practice a scale into exercises that more closely resemble the kinds of lines that you would actually play in a solo. Take this line for example. You start out with an arpeggio on the root, third, and fifth notes of the scale. Then you play up a scale fragment on the 5th, 6th, 7th, and root note. After that, you play down the scale in thirds, landing on the 5th note of the scale. A line like this works well for improvising because you're hitting the main chord tones on strong beats. And this is what we call outlining the chords. You're also not just playing up and down scales, which can sound boring. But these chord tones are the notes you need to aim for when you're improvising. Whatever path you take, you need to try to finish your line on one of these chord tones. When you start transcribing and analyzing improvised solos, you find that all of these scale variations come into play. You'll also see that there are a lot of polyrhythms that get used, mainly quarter and eighth note triplets. So use your imagination to come up with your own rhythmic variations. This is actually a big help when it comes to improvising. Taking the time to come up with your own variations is just a slower way of coming up with improvised lines while you're soloing. Eventually the process gets faster and you'll be making up entire solos that use all of the scale variations that you can think of. Guys, thanks for taking the time to watch this video. If you like the content here, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button, and also leave me a comment in the section below letting me know how this technique worked for you. Until next time, keep practicing, and I'll see you soon with another quick and easy trumpet tip.